Venus Retrograde and the Deaths of U.S. Presidents, Part 1. Of the 44 men who have served as chief executive of the United States federal government, 6 are still alive. Out of the remaining 38, 5 of them died during the same 100-day Venus retrograde phase, one tip of the 5-pointed star. With every 8-year cyclic return, the entire phase begins and ends about 2 to 3 calendar days and 2 to 3 zodiacal degrees earlier than the previous station. Consequently, the 5 points of the Venus star pattern gradually shift from one tropical sign to the preceding sign over time. William Henry Harrison, 9th President of the United States and the first to die in office. When Harrison died on April 4, 1841, transiting Venus was a decelerating evening star and 19 days from its retrograde station in tropical Taurus. 8 years later, James Polk, 11th President of the United States, set the standing speed record for days lived after leaving office, a mere 103. When Polk died of cholera at his home in Nashville, Tennessee on June 15, 1849, transiting Venus was an accelerating morning star and 12 days past its direct station in tropical Taurus. The first and most infamous of presidential murders, 16th U.S. President Abraham Lincoln was shot at Washington's Ford Theater on April 14, 1865. He died at 7:22:10 the next morning, as transiting Venus was again a decelerating evening star in tropical Taurus and just a day away from its retrograde station. This next example is a bit looser and could possibly be excluded. 20th U.S. President James Garfield was shot at a Washington train station on July 2, 1881. Transiting Venus was 38 days past its direct station in tropical Taurus, which is a bit wider than the other examples in this study. And Garfield didn't die until nearly 3 months later, long after Venus had left the retrograde phase. Jumping ahead to the mid-20th century, we arrive at the death of the 32nd U.S. President, Franklin Roosevelt, who died April 12, 1945, less than 3 months into his unprecedented 4th term. When Roosevelt died, transiting Venus was within 3 days of making its interior conjunction with the Sun. Dying just over 8 years after leaving office and 24 years after invading Germany, 34th U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower passed away on March 28, 1969, in Washington, D.C., again when Venus was retrograde in Aries, this time 11 days from its interior conjunction with the Sun. So, even though one Venus retrograde phase lasts about 100 to 108 days and repeats only once every 8 years, accounting for about 1/29th of total time, no fewer than 5 presidents out of 38 have died during this small window in time. For argument's sake, let's include the shooting of James Garfield. Even though the shooting itself fell a little further from the post-direct station acceleration period of 30 to 34 days that I typically use, if we allow for a bit of goalpost shifting, we now have 6 out of 38 men with the same job title who died or were mortally wounded during the same brief 108-day window in time. And while we're playing with goalposts, revolutionary author Thomas Paine was never President of the United States. Paine, who died on June 8, 1809, also falls into this category of very notable American men who left planet Earth during the same small but identifiable window of time. So let's just toss Thomas Paine in with our group of 38 dead presidents. We now have 7 out of 39 men who died or were mortally wounded during the same Venus retrograde phase. This takes our proportion down to less than 1 in 6. Let's play around just a bit more. Richard Nixon, the 37th U.S. President, did not die during a Venus retrograde phase. He died in New York City on April 22, 1994. However, Nixon did die when transiting Venus was just 4 zodiacal minutes away from the tropical degree of 25 Taurus. Well, as it happens, our first 2 subjects, William Henry Harrison and Abraham Lincoln, also died when Venus was at 25 Taurus. There are 360 degrees in the tropical zodiac, and yet 3 U.S. presidents died when Venus was in a small range of the same singular degree. Thomas Paine also died when Venus was at 25 tropical Taurus. 4 out of 39 is a ratio of nearly 1 in 10, for a result that logically should be closer to 1 in 90. And wouldn't you know it, Venus was also at 25 Taurus when James Garfield was shot. But then, the plot never stops getting thicker once you know where to look for the repentagram.